Hey, Michael, welcome back to the Corporate Escapee podcast. It's good to have you here again.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think this topic is going to be super interesting. And the one things I've learned over the years with this podcast is just going with an open mind and curiosity. And when we had a little bit of a back and forth on email about AI and wisdom and the Escapee world, you piqued my interest.
Okay, yeah.
So, one, with that semi-vague introduction, welcome back. And yeah, so what have you been up to?
So I'm still building out my consulting business. I've been doing this now for 8 years, unbelievably. Typically, I have been taking on CXO roles, usually a head of marketing, a head of product, in an interim phase where I come in, I help the company scale, grow, get their ducks in a row, and really operate a little bit more efficiently. And I've actually been using AI a fair amount. And I think there's been a number of different use cases, and I've become more comfortable, and I think getting a lot more value out of it recently. And so and as I've been thinking about it, and using it a lot more, I started realizing that there's a lot of advantages to being more experienced in using AI than, being more junior and replacing, trying to do, replace some of that. So that's why I had really thought what I had reached out to you about, because I thought it was really interesting as something that might be a useful way to think about things for your.
Yeah, absolutely. Because within the community, some of our conversations, I use it every day. I'm probably not optimizing for it, but it's definitely becoming part of the tool belt. And I know within the community, the folks that have escaped are definitely curious and leveraging it as well. So yeah, I figured we could have this little open discussion. Definitely curious to see where you're leveraging it and thoughts about how we as a collective could even get better with it. So,
Sure.
yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I guess what really got me started is, as you know, my background is in finance, and you went to the same business school as I did, the Chicago, and the
Shout out to Booth.
Yeah, to Booth. And the central tenet of it is efficient markets, right? Like if
Yeah.
everyone has the same information, they're going to make the same decisions. And I started thinking about AI the same way, which is you go on LinkedIn and someone will have a list of prompts. Here are the killer prompts for doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, if you're I'm just going to say a brand manager for Coke, and you use ChatGPT and these prompts to come up with a new flavor, right? If you have a friend at Pepsi and they're using the same prompts against the same data set, they're going to get the exact same answer, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so when you think about what it takes to actually be differentiated, it really is really having this insight that you've gained over the years that you can bring to that as part of the discussion. And so that's what I really think the advantage that we as more seasoned people have in using AI and really getting the value out of it that more junior people who might not know what they don't know aren't going to be able to do.
Right. Because that whole thing with the learning models, right, or what ChatGPT is pulling off, it only knows what it knows, right? It's not forward thinking in the sense. So
Yes.
It wasn't aware of some flavor that didn't exist. It's going to be hard to be creative thinking about, right, where the trends are going. That's one thing I've tried to do with my model a little bit is keep feeding in the podcast. Like I'll feed in this podcast episode when we're done so it can start learning more the way I think. But it's, to your point, it's going to help. Now, anyway, I don't want to cut you off, but I 100% agree.
You're absolutely right. Like I think being able to intuit the future, have empathy, which is another big one. Like AI, it's a machine, and when you talk to people, you can read the room. You have just this intuition. You can understand how people might react, and an AI engine doesn't really do that. And just being able to, there was actually this article I read from Accenture where they were talking about this. And one of the phrases that they used, two phrases that I thought were really interesting. One was intelligent interrogation, which I do all the time. So for instance, I'm spending a lot of time on pricing and product packaging for SaaS companies. And one of the gaps in that particular area is having a quantitative approach to do it, right?
Okay.
So I can ask the model. I use Claude because it's usually better at statistics. I can say, hey, develop a model that does X, right? And it'll spit something out. And I'm not a data scientist, so it's not something I can do myself, but I have enough experience with analytics and statistics that when something comes back, I can probe or I can question it. And it was interesting. I've had a couple exchanges where it will say, okay, you need a sample size of 50 to get this answer. And I'll say, okay, well, where'd that come from? And it'll say, oops, I guess I made a mistake. Well, actually, 45. So if you're able to press it, it can enhance the results, or it can prevent you from making mistakes. And I think having more seasoned experience enables you to do that, whereas a junior person might not really know as much about that. And then the other thing, which you just alluded to, is this term they call reciprocal apprenticing. Again, it's exactly with that example, which is you're teaching the engine how to think like you, right? Like you're imparting your knowledge on it. And so if I have this long exchange, I can guide the engine. I'm not going to tell it what to do. And obviously there's a lot of stuff I can't, but I can teach it some of these things that it might not otherwise know.
Right.
Some of these sort of softer skills.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you were talking about, right, being able to probe, it goes back to sales 101 and a good discovery session, right? When you're talking with a client, they may think they have one problem, but if you keep asking enough questions, have the empathy and listen, you'll start to realize, right, so wow, it's the same thing as the model or the ChatGPT. It thinks it knows but until you can clarify or ask those right questions, you're running the risk of it not being the right data, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah. Well, just even knowing, I remember when I first started this is a finance example. I started, I was in investment banking many, many moons ago. And I remember we used to generate these humongous Excel spreadsheets, these models of these M&A mergers and stuff. And invariably, I was right out of college. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but invariably the managing director within 30 seconds would find the one number that was wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. It's the same principle with AI, is that it can make mistakes because it's based on certain assumptions in the data it has. It's a probabilistic model. And there are going to be things that you will notice if you're experienced that you're going to be able to pick them out and correct it and kind of course correct it and make sure it's making the right decisions. And I think, so that's one piece. And I think the other piece is that, more seasoned people are going to just be better at using AI because they know how to use it a little bit more efficiently. And an example would be, I would never have ChatGPT write a LinkedIn post from. I would have it do a draft, right? And knowing full well that I'm going to have to rewrite it because it takes me forever just to get the first draft on the page. Again, that's if you don't know any better or you haven't done it 100 times before, you're not going to know to do that, right? You're not going to know how you can improve what comes out of the engine. And
Yeah.
So I think when if we're people like us are going into a company, it's really important to be able to stress that as a value that you bring, because a lot of times companies will say, oh yeah, content schmontent, I can just get ChatGPT to write these letters, or I can just get this junior person out of college to do it, right? They can just crank them out. And the fact is, you're only going to get a certain level of quality. And if you really want to stand out, differentiate, have value add for your customers, it's this knowledge base that we have that we can, train the engine that's really going to be the added value. And that's why I think in a lot of these upcoming cases, that's where I think that a real differentiator is for the more seasoned people.
And even scoping out the BS detector, right? Because you're going to see something that a junior person or business owner isn't going to recognize and go, whoa, that doesn't make sense. Where other people may just run with it and print, publish, and go, and it could be completely the wrong thing.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I think it's kind of funny. Like I was looking back at some of my examples, and I mentioned the one about the sample size. And a lot of times the response from Claude, I'm looking at it right now, is like, yes, you're right. I apologize for working backwards and I made this assumption and the assumption's wrong. So let's redo it. But if I hadn't asked about it, it just would have sailed through.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get the, because I use the Chat GPT Pro or whatever they call it now, and also Perplexity, because Perplexity, I think, does a better job searching the web and pulling. But even there, I'll ask it about a specific company that had an issue. I think What Madam or whatever the name of that company that, it did a survey of employees, and basically anybody that came back stressed, they laid them off. And whether that's 100% true or not, I was just trying to dig into that more. And it was pulling up articles on stress in corporate today, and it wasn't even that exact article, right? So it was, yeah, you're right. You got to be absolutely careful with it. But I think where you're going, and I like it, is it's more of a strategic tool that we as solo business owners can use, and we can use it potentially more effectively than even some folks inside the company, right?
Yeah. I think so. You're right. I think there are two parts. One is that we bring a value set that is greater than someone who doesn't have our level of experience, and we can make more of the tool and the output than other people might be able to. So we do have an additive effect above and beyond just the raw engine. The other interesting thing I do is, since I'm on my own, is I sort of view AI as my co-pilot a lot of time.
Yeah.
And there've been so many times I'm on a call, and like I had this client, and one of the people there, we had a little bit of we didn't see eye to eye.
A little disagreement. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some times when I would be on the phone, I'd be like, am I going crazy? Like maybe this person is right. Like maybe I'm really misunderstanding it. And on the call, I could just quickly ask ChatGPT, I'm thinking this and I'm hearing this, like, what am I crazy? And it will either tell me, yes, I am, or it will tell me I'm not. And I think it just gives me the confidence that it's just being able to bounce it off another person, so to speak.
Yeah.
Your ideas.
Kind of along that, one of the things I'm doing a much more like, my ideas will come out of, left field. If I'm listening to a podcast and I'm at the gym and I hear an idea, and historically when I do brainstorms, I've just got a running list and then maybe I'll get back to it. But what I've started to do is act a little quicker on those ideas. I'll plug it into Chat GPT and basically say, hey, look back at all of our interactions, so you've got a good grasp on the way I think and what I'm working on, those types of things, and say, where would this fit? Is this an idea that we could leverage within it? And obviously the first response is going to be absolutely great idea. I'm like, then no, this time be honest with me. Do you think this makes sense? And I have found it does start to push back on me now, where, I was looking at two different headlines for a post, and I liked one, and I said, well, be honest, which one would you go? He's like, well, that one, I get why you're going there, but it's too complicated. Your audience is going to respond better to the simple, to the point. You're going to bring them in much quicker. I'm like, you know what? You're right. Damn it.
That's really interesting.
Getting too cute for my own good, and it's just somebody that can call me out quickly. And again, you don't have to listen to it, but I 100% the same way. I'm using it in ways that I never imagined, but it's actually accelerating a lot of the things that I'm doing.
I completely agree. That's a really fantastic example. I think it's nice to be able to bounce ideas off of someone at the water cooler, right? And people always say that's the number one benefit of being not remote, is you're in the office, you run into people in the hall, and you kind of, collaborate on little things. In the absence of that, I find ChatGPT or these engines to be very useful for that.
Yeah.
Because it can even just spark your own thinking, I'm sure. Like, you can just get ideas on, for the headline. I was looking at these two. I see what it's saying, and why don't I do this? It's a good compromise between the two, right? So it's really good for brainstorming.
If my wife walked in and saw some of the back and forth, she'd think I was talking to a person, right? Because when I first started playing with ChatGPT, it was super formal, right? Very specific. Now, hell, if I have a typo or I just speak more in my own language and it gets the point, it gets what I'm saying, right? It's not confusing. It's learned to adopt that it does sound like I'm having a back and forth or a chat session with somebody else. So
let me ask you this. Do you thank ChatGPT for its work? Or say please?
Sometimes just when I'm not thinking and just going, I'm like, yeah, thanks. That's perfect. Right. Type of thing where I almost, maybe subconsciously, or maybe it's like, is it going to give me better answers if I'm nicer to it? I don't know. Maybe you don't have to be nice to your chat, but when I do think about that is it's capturing my tone better. And if it knows I'm responding that way, then it knows that's kind of the way I would respond to a customer or a prospect, or in my writing would be
Yeah.
more that way versus the overly direct. I mean, it'd probably be quicker if I was direct, but that's not comfortable for me.
I'm the same way.
Okay.
But
So I'm not alone.
I think there actually has been studies around this, and apparently you get better results if you're courteous,
Nicer to your
surprisingly. But it
your
might be just for the reason you just mentioned, which is, picks up on your tone and it can kind of
could
mimic you a
be.
little bit better.
So where do you think, I mean, this is a really interesting discussion. So obviously we've got it working on the back ends, but how in the short term, well, let me give you one idea that I was thinking about before we talked, and then you actually took me another level deeper, which I like. So I dig into that, is with AI becoming more a really big tool for small businesses. One, business owners may or may not be comfortable with, they're going to have to find somebody that knows AI. But the biggest challenge I find with those businesses, with anything that they're doing, they just don't have the experience in a sales or a marketing or a branding or a pricing type of discussion. So if you have AI, it's going to pull historically maybe from some company that doesn't align with exactly what this business is doing. And that's where I see the escapees, the GenXers that have decades of experience and wisdom, which I like that word you use, to help point the chat GPT in the right way. With that thinking, where do you see it on the flip side? I get it now from our side in helping us with our solo businesses. Where do you see the business opportunity?
Well, there's many different levels to where AI can help. And you mentioned at the beginning, there's the time saving would be the lowest level. And then I think the ideation and the new ideas is really the upper level. And I think even small businesses sometimes don't even know how to get started at that lower level, right? So
Agreed.
that's the first thing, is find the opportunities to just get efficiency, save yourself some time, save your employees some time. And then as you get more comfortable with it and how it works, then you can kind of work your way up the scale. One of the interesting things I've also noticed, and this happens a lot, it's happened a lot on the professional services side, is that, so Accenture all the way down to the little independent consultants, what they've been doing for the past 9 months is they've invested in AI as a way to replicate a lot of what the junior people in the consulting stack do,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so
Right.
they're out there talking about all the cost savings they're getting. So the problem is, then they go to their customers, and these big companies aren't stupid. They want the cost savings passed on to them, right? And so you
100%
see,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So you see this humongous margin compression because they didn't sell it right. And so if you're a small business, what you really need to think about is, if I'm going to be talking about AI and how I'm bringing it into the business, like, why is that good for my customers? Like, what do they care? And how
Yes.
is it an added benefit to them? How's it going to make me have a product that's better than what they have? And that's, I think, how you really need to talk about it, is from a benefit standpoint, rather than, oh yeah, now I don't have to do this because I got this engine to do it. That does, if I'm a customer of that company, I don't really care. As long as it gets done,
Yeah, exactly right.
yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I haven't heard very many people talking about it, thinking all the way to the end customer, which makes total sense. When you
Yeah.
said, I'm like, yeah, sure. But you're right. We usually think internally where the benefit's going to come. But if you can't, because the other thing, again, maybe that's just my old school thinking, even though we grew up through 3 different technology evolutions and AI is here, there's no reason why we can't get comfortable. And the other thing I have to keep reminding myself to, you mentioned earlier, small businesses tend to not be very fluent in the newest technologies. They're heavily focused on their company or their product or what they're building, and depending on how big they get, right, leveraging it. So chances are, even if you're not certified in AI, you're going to have a better working knowledge of how it works than most of your customers. So I think, I've been hesitant to think about, hey, do we, all of us as escapees, go all in on AI? I think a lot of them already are, which I think it makes, because it's going to be a tool in the toolkit. And if you can use it right, it's going to be a differentiator, right?
Yeah, it is a tool in the toolkit. The other area that I think there's a lot of opportunity, and this may or may not relevant for everyone's. The other way to differentiate what comes out of AI is what you feed into it, right? So you gave this example of you feed in all the past podcasts and then, or your current business, and then it informs the decision it's making. And
Right.
for any business that has any of that or any data on their customers, they can use that to inform the AI to come out with unique or better answers than their competition. So there's just another way. It might be it's a little bit more advanced of a application, but it's just another way to think about it, especially for companies that are, content or data rich.
Yeah. And,
How can we help them leverage that to create a competitive advantage?
and so if I interpret what you're saying, it's get comfortable with the technology, what it can do. You may not have to be the one that programs it, right? Because, I listened to a podcast today. Let me just pull up, talking about more, building apps, which is going to be mostly AI driven. Let's see, the company's called REPLIT. And basically the way this is now designed is advanced this far that you or I could go in, talk to a ChatGPT prompt and say, what is the app that you want to build? And you tell it what you want it to do. And then it comes back kind of with a prototype and recommendations of how to do this. Then it goes and programs it.
Yeah.
Right. So that took a while for the app building to get there. But I think AI, you will end up, if we don't do it ourselves from a programming, it's not that far behind. We can find somebody that can come in and help us build right based on what the questions we're asking and the data we're looking to extract, even if it is pulling in all the data from a small business to help tell a bit better story. Again, that was a really long-winded way to get to, are you advocating to get to the point where we able to decode yourself with an AI?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. So that's a really great example. So if I went to that site and I said, I want to create, let's say I'm in the business of, what's a business, project managing.
Yeah.
Right? I have a project manager. I want to develop a project management app for,
Small
lawn
businesses.
services.
Yeah. Even better.
Making that up. So I could go to that site and say, here's all the functions I want this app to do. And here's who it's for, create the app. If I'm already in the business and let's say I know how I have a website that does it. Now I want an app. Let's just say, and I know how people are using the website. If I bring my server logs in that can inform the AI on how people actually do use it, what they
Right.
do, what their workflows are, and then the AI can use that to basically design the app, you're going to get a way better result than if it just guessed. And so that's what I mean is that if you're thinking through using AI to do anything, just think, is there any other information that the company has that I can upload into the engine that's going to make it produce a better result?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And you got me even thinking, because one of the things, even when I left, obviously you were one of the OGs of the Escapees, being it out longer, but one of the biggest challenges for these small businesses is still the data, right, side of it, and being it, one, even having it, two, let alone analyzing it. But if you could create a way to help build that foundation earlier, like just so you know your customer information. It's CRMs, it's usually garbage in, or you've got three different data sets, the CRM, the ERP, and everything else, that it's really hard to pull that to, maybe we're getting closer to a point, I know we're off the topic a little bit, but along those lines to help a small business create. So from day one, they understand their customers, what they're doing, what they're buying, how they're interacting, versus, when they get big enough, then we'll try to go in and figure out and rebuild and try to do everything. So
Yeah. And I think AI is especially good for that, whether it's just the mechanics of merging data sets, which might be a little bit more data intensive businesses. But if you think about this lawn care business, like let's say I have 1,000 customers in my lawn care business and I know all the different services they do, spraying, cleanup, the fertilization, the how often cut their lawn, da. What I could do is and I have it in QuickBooks or where I could bring that all into Claude, which is the one I use, but any of them should work, and just say, so I here's all the information. Help me figure out which customers are most likely to want to do a fall fertilization, that I should serve them an ad or give them an offer for that. It can do a very simple regression, correlation, or analysis of a straightforward data set to help do that.
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing that is an easy way for people to get started where they don't really have to know much. And it might be, oh, the people who live farther away from the lake do, need more fertilizer than people close to the lake or whatever. I mean, it could be any
Yeah.
number of
Yeah. Yeah.
things. Whatever data you put in there, it can look for signals or markers in the data for you, so you don't have to pour over a spreadsheet and try to guess. And
Yeah. And even,
it actually makes it very easy. Like as part of my business, when I'm doing pricing, I'm trying to do some predictive modeling around how you set a price for software that reflects the value that the customer is going to get. And there's a lot of different ways people talk about doing that.
yeah.
The frameworks, but there's not a lot of information on how to actually do it. Like here's what my price is. Like that's what historically has been sort of the art of the whole thing. And I've been able to use these AI engines to basically develop models that they're pretty good. They're pretty predictive of what you should charge somebody, or of approximating the value that they're receiving from your service. I've had to feed in a lot of customer data to do that, but it's stuff I cannot do myself because, like I said, I'm not a data scientist. I can't program
Right.
and they generate the Python code. I could basically create a little app that does this analysis and put it on my website if I knew what I was doing.
Right. Well, now you
Like,
can with Replit, right? Just plug in and
oh
say,
yeah,
hey, I need this. Here's the
exactly.
data sets I'm going to plug in. This is what I need to spit out. And what are the APIs that I need to do that? And
Yeah, exactly.
I
So
think even,
it's easy. It's so easy to just say, here's the answer I want, and here's the data I have. Help me get there. Whereas before, you had to kind of know how to get there yourself.
yeah. And even just playing off where we kind of started this conversation with the wisdom is yes, you can do the regression or the correlation and figure out who's the ideal to offer these services. But then when you start looking at what are some new services, right, that's where some of the experience and the wisdom is going to come in to help make some of these forward-looking types of decisions. So I think it's, like I said, I'm super bullish about, Gen X outside of corporate and the value that we can provide I'm not as optimistic within the larger organizations where we can play, but
Yeah.
definitely within the small, right, that have been hungry for this type of expertise. Now with, between AI and some of the solo business models, we can help these companies. So
Yeah. And I think the other thing with AI is you can, it's sort of like the teach a man to fish thing, right? Like if there's definitely a model where you as a consultant can come in, spend whatever, 6 weeks with the company and give them the playbook, right?
yeah,
And it's probably, that I guess there's pros and cons to if you want to have a business model that has these short-term engagements, that's a choice. It's obviously a lot lower commitment and risk for the company, and you can have a just tremendous amount of ongoing value versus them thinking, if I bring this person in, I'm going to have to keep them here forever, or I'm
right.
never going to be able to do it myself.
Or even a full-time hire, right? That's an 18-month commitment typically, right? So if there's some things you can do with a partner versus, I said, I think we're just at the starting to uncover the opportunities within this space. So
Sure. Sure.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Michael, man, this time flew by, and I love the concept of this episode. So listeners out there, longtime listeners, I know a lot of our episodes are geared towards use cases or, what escapees are doing, but I'm going to start to blend in some more of the business, right, applications. How do we grow? How do we look at things differently? One, because I'm super interested in these conversations, so I'm guessing others will be as well. So we may have to have you pop back on here, Michael, on a regular basis to continue these conversations, because I do think it's going to create a lot of opportunities for us or the ones that want to go after it. So
I agree.
appreciate your time today. And what's the best place for if people want to connect and learn more about you? Where's a good way for them to find you?
Well, so you can either find me on LinkedIn, Michael Himmelfarb, or my website is hg-partners.com. And so you can get all kinds of information there and connect with me there. I'm happy to talk to anybody to brainstorm. I think this is very interesting. It's an interesting intellectual pursuit.
Agreed.
Happy to talk about it and if I can be helpful to interviewer.
And listeners out there that are in the Escapee collective already, you'll see more of Michael. He's actually going to come on. We're working to finalize it to come in and help the paid community think through pricing, our own internal pricing, right, which is where we struggle. So we're bringing in the big guns to help you grow your businesses. And so, Michael, as always, I appreciate the time, and we'll be catching up with you soon.
Yeah, sounds great, Brett. Thank you.